Good afternoon. It is Thursday and we are live. Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Kimmelman. I'm the president of High Rock Accounting and a National Xero ambassador. And welcome to Xero Limits. Tam?
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Tam. I'm an ex-Xero employee, and I run a community for anyone who wants to learn Xero called Zero to Zero. Pun totally intended, but happy to be here, and yeah, excited to have the conversation with A2XI today.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I haven't joined your community yet, Tam, but I'm excited because I'm already expecting to learn some things that I might not know about Xero, and that's far from me. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, that's the thing about software, right? It's just so fast moving. It's hard to stay up to date all the time. So
constantly changing, and even knowing some of the roadmap, it's hard to stay up to date on it. So, and speaking of changing software, ever changing, we're joined today by two of the leaders of A to X accounting, Geoff and Amy, and I will defer to you, Amy, to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey everyone, I'm Amy, so I'm Product Marketing Manager at A2X. Usually I'm based in New Zealand, but at the moment I'm calling in from the UK. And that's actually a really nice little intro that you did there, Tammy, in terms of trying to keep up to date with ever-changing software, because that's kind of my role at A2X, to make sure that everything really we are releasing is getting communicated with our customers, and both directly with customers and with our accountants as well.
Yeah, and we're seeing you showing up on Instagram and TikTok all the time talking about the new releases. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's how I get to keep up with you.
Yeah, I've had some people be like, oh, you're real.
It is not an avatar.
Yeah, exactly.
She wasn't even scheduled to be on this podcast, but she heard that there were cameras involved, and she's like...
She's all over it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, Geoff, how about a quick intro there for you?
Yeah, and my name's Geoff. I'm the head of marketing at A2X. I work with Amy and a team of about 7 other marketers to work with practices like Jay, convince them that you can automate your e-commerce accounting, and then help them use technology like A2X to provide more value to their clients. And yeah, Jay, I love the name of the podcast or live stream. At first, I was like, Xero Limits. Why didn't they call it No Limits? And then I was like, oh, I totally get it. Xero Limits. Super clever.
Yes.
Not that clever. That's
play on words, Mr. Marketing Man. So let's set the table here a little bit. So I have known Geoff much longer than his tenure at A to X. So he started when I met him at HubDoc. And he went through the Xero acquisition. He was at Xero for a while, working on the HubDoc side and the Xero side at that point.
And on the Xero side. So, so I worked at HubDoc. I've been working with you and the accounting and bookkeeping community, I think, since 2016, 2017, till the eventual acquisition by Xero in 2018, where I continued to lead the HubDoc side, but I was also the head of product marketing for Xero's core accounting product, specifically the reconciliation screen that folks know and love. And then transitioned over still into cloud accounting, but a little bit more niched into A2X on the e-commerce accounting side.
So you're pretty much in tune with the needs of the accounting community when it comes to what we need to do when it comes to marketing, because our target customer is your target customer when we're in the e-commerce niche.
100%. And similarly to HubDoc, A2X is very partner driven. Like, our objective is to collaborate with accountants and bookkeepers to provide accurate financials to small businesses. In the case of A2X, specifically, it's e-commerce businesses. So it's been an awesome journey, right? Working with accountants and bookkeepers like yourself, Jay, to really provide to small businesses with accurate financials. Because we know, like, it sounds fluffy. We just did a webinar yesterday on cash flow forecasting for e-commerce. But like, when you actually get into the nitty gritty of what accurate financials can provide your business in terms of insights to help make really great decisions, I think, it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, most definitely. So what are some of the tactics or tasks we can do as, we're accountants, we're not marketers, but putting on our marketer's hat, what would you suggest we look at? What are some of the top 3 things we should look at as far as attracting new e-commerce clients?
I think it's a really good question. So I'll talk a little bit about the fundamental belief that we have at A2X. So A2X, for those that don't know, and Amy will get into it a little bit later, is an e-commerce accounting automation solution. So what we do is we take sales data from Amazon, Shopify, eBay, Etsy, Walmart, and the online sales channels that you would recognize, and we sync that into Xero and QuickBooks and other accounting software. And effectively what we do in the middle is we organize it into neat summaries that breaks out your sales, your fees, your refunds, your gift cards, your taxes, so on and so forth. So that when you get a deposit from Amazon into Xero, A2X is going to post a summary that'll match that deposit so you can reconcile that in one click. So we work with accountants and bookkeepers to provide accurate financials to small businesses, specifically those that are selling online. And accountants and bookkeepers provide additional value, additional insights, compliance, tax, monthly bookkeeping services, so on and so forth. So collectively, we're trying to service the small business client. The challenge is, and as most of you know, there's a lot of small businesses that are either trying to do it themselves or not doing it at all. And our job as a collective is to try to convince them that there is a better way, that accurate financials are valuable, that they're important, and that they should be using a combination of A2X and accountants and bookkeepers. So we work really closely with our accounting and bookkeeping partners to try to bring that message to market and try to get more of those e-commerce businesses into the fold using those tools and technologies, as well as those services. So, Jay, you asked a question in terms of what are the marketing tactics that we use to try to bring that message to market and try to acquire those specific e-commerce clients. There's a few. So I mentioned, there are the folks that either do it themselves or the folks that don't do it at all. Number one is we need to educate the market on why working with A2X and working with an accounting or bookkeeping practice is valuable and is important. And that really comes back to financials. So I talked about this in terms of what we're doing yesterday. We did a webinar on cash flow forecasting for e-commerce. I think one of the tactics is education, right? Educating our target audiences on why accurate financials is important and the value that it can provide to their businesses. And some of the ways that we can distribute this education together, like A2X, we deal with a lot of webinars, but we actually, we're 2024, I think people are kind of tired of joining these live webinars. Although this is live and super convenient and it will be on demand and people will get access to it, we optimize our webinars to actually rank for YouTube search. So in terms of a tactic that we see working really, really well for a lot of the practices that we're working with is to focus on a topic that can educate their target audience on the value of accurate financials, and then optimizing it for a bunch of keywords that are available on YouTube search, so that their content is ranking. So video is probably one of, I would say, the most valuable tactics. Another really valuable tactic that we see and is actually incredibly interesting is TikTok Shop. So most people here are using TikTok, and they're probably noticing that there's a lot of advertising that's happening on TikTok, a lot of e-commerce businesses that are trying to sell their products through this channel. One of the cool thing is if you're targeting an e-commerce business and they're using TikTok Shop to distribute their products, then they're likely on TikTok Shop. So another way, a great way to get access to this audience is to reach them, again, with video. And one of the nice tactics that we've seen is that accountants and bookkeepers don't have a tremendous amount of time. A lot of them don't even have marketing departments in their organization. So the practice owners, Jay, like yourself, I know that you do your own marketing, right?
Yeah.
So another cool tactic that we're seeing is the repurposing of those long form webinar content that they're trying to rank for on YouTube and splicing them down into short clips that they're then distributing across TikTok. or YouTube Shorts or LinkedIn. And the really cool thing is that there's actually software that's available today for you to use that leverages artificial intelligence, that actually analyzes the video, tells you what the most interesting bits of the video are. They slice and dice it, and they also offer the closed captioning. So like when you think, okay, well, I got to do video for YouTube, I got to do video for TikTok, there's actually tools, and I can name one, Opus, as an example. Opus is a tool that we leverage and use all the time. We upload our long form webinar content, slice and dices it, and then posts it as short form content onto TikTok. So it's another really cool tactic. And then the third tactic is to work with teams like A2X or Xero or Intuit. All of these solutions have directories. So you have the Pro Advisor directory on the Intuit side, you have the Pro Partner directory, and then on the A2X side, we have an e-commerce accountant and bookkeeper directory. Those directories are incredibly helpful if you optimize listing for e-commerce businesses for a way to get access to your audience. People that are looking for accounting and bookkeeping services, like ranking on Google is incredibly hard, time consuming, right? You have to like take the time to optimize your website, create content, so on and so forth. Like a fast track or a tactic, because that was the original question, would be to optimize your listings on these directories or get on these directories and make sure that these listings articulate that you service and support e-commerce clients. The A2X directory, as an example, if you're an A2X partner, has generated over 500 e-commerce accounting leads over the last 12 months, distributed across roughly 50 partners. So it's an incredible lead source for accounting and bookkeeping partners. And I would imagine the Xero partner directory, as an example, if you optimize your listing for e-commerce, you're likely to get some level of lead volume from there. Jay, you could probably speak better to this, given the fact that you're on that directory and you've optimized your practice for e-commerce. Good source of leads?
Yeah, for sure. And we love the A2X directory because we get leads coming in, gives us an opportunity to actually find out what the audience is, what our avatar is actually looking for, and it gives us the ability to hone in on our services to that. And it leads to conversations, which leads to engagement, and that's what it's about. The Xero directory is good too, but I find we get a lot of spam through that, unfortunately. But I hate to say that, but it is true. And I still get, believe it or not, I still get responses off the Intuit directory, even though I don't offer QuickBooks services. So strange as that would be.
They're looking for the technology, right? They're looking for the service. Like I'm looking for a bookkeeping service. If you fulfill it using QuickBooks, Xero, it doesn't.
Yeah, right? For sure. But I mean, the directories are great, and making sure that you build your profiles to suit the needs of the prospects you're looking for. That's what it comes down to. Now, for me, I think all you need to do to bring people onto a platform like A2X or into our service for e-commerce, our e-commerce line, is to walk them through the steps it takes to reconcile anything out of Amazon. Because it is not easy. And, you go back and you're working with a prospect and they go into the dashboard and it's like, okay, here's our sales. Well, no, that's your net. That's not your sales. That's after all of your fees have come out. What do you mean my fees? And it's like, it's very tricky and you got to actually dig a little deeper. And then pinning down what your inventory balances are in each warehouse could also be tricky. So, I will let Amy hit on
what
some
you
of
just
those.
said in my tactics. Like you just use a really good example,
right,
which is like actually show the reconciliation process from Amazon into Xero as an example. Yeah. Imagine you did a webinar on this topic, right? And you had this video on demand asset that now is trying to rank on YouTube for Amazon Xero reconciliation. It's a long form piece of content. Okay, great. You now have that on YouTube. It's ranking as a channel. That's one that's continuing to grow and continuing to be incredibly valuable. Now you use the second tactic, a third-party artificial intelligence tool like Opus, to splice and dice that video so that you can turn it into short form content that you can use TikTok and other social platforms to distribute, right? That's that idea and the tactics put into a real world example. And then the last one, which is a little bit different, which is use and leverage third-party directories. The last thing I'm going to say about marketing is like, we fundamentally believe here at A2X that every e-commerce business should be connected and working with an accountant or bookkeeper that is specialized in e-commerce. So if you're interested in kind of discovering what are the things that we can do together to do a better job of acquiring those types of clients together, we have an amazing partner program. You can come and check us out, have a conversation with us. You'll see that most of the marketing that A2X does is actually connected with one of our accounting partners. We rarely do things on our own. So come and chat with us. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. So those would be my I have like a million other tactics, but like, given the nature of this podcast, those are probably the 3 quickest and easiest ones that people can take out of this conversation and go and implement before the end of today, right? Well, maybe not a long-form webinar.
Well, you can. You can start throwing that together. You're not going to air it today, but you can start planning it. It's very actionable. That's what it's about. And, I'm going to take you up on those other topics, when we come back around to our retreat, because I'd love to, bring you out there and put some drinks in you. Well, we're going to do some of that at Camp A2X as well. Exactly. We're talking about a roundtable there that we want to broadcast as well. But, we're not going to be sitting around the campfire drinking and having a good time with that. Kind of like we did last year at our retreat. Both of you came on in remotely, but we'd love to have you there and, having some fun with us. So, and talking marketing. So, yeah. So let's jump into the product now. And before we do, though, Tam, any questions or anything for Geoff, or are you ready to jump into the product?
No, I just think it's unique, right? I don't see very many software companies like yourselves who are partnering so closely with accounting bookkeeping firms. It just kind of shows like your commitment to supporting accountants and bookkeepers. You even have links to other accounting firms own like e-commerce courses. So if you had other accountants who wanted to deep dive into what it's like to be a specialized e-commerce accountant, like those resources are available there as well. So just something that I recognize and wanted to call out there as well.
Awesome. Appreciate that. I think like a fun fact is like we do still have some businesses that try to do their own accounting and they use A2X and they come to our support team and you would imagine that they'd ask questions about A2X, but a lot of the time they're asking actual accounting questions, like fundamental accounting questions. And I think that's one of the motivations behind our view on the market is really every business should be connected with an accounting professional, with the exception of accountants who go off and start their own e-commerce business. They might not need to, but everybody else, full stop. It would be valuable to their business. And Xero provides a stat all the time, like businesses that are connected to an accountant or bookkeeper have a significantly higher success rate at the end of 5 years than the businesses that don't. And we've really, I think, internalized that, and we've tried to bring that to market.
And I want to say that the Jamies created this change in A2X. It was already there with Paul and Ashley. They were very connected to the community as well. But, the Jamies bring it to the next level. They were part of that ecosystem with you at HubDoc. They brought HubDoc to us. It's just been amazing what they have done and being around it and being part of it for all these years. It's just amazing watching it and watch it transfer over to A2X and just watch it just grow. It's been a great transformation over the last couple of years. And I am proud to be one of those early adopters here in the US and, love it to death. And I love the fact that, we can actually use it with the other tools that we use, even if we need an inventory app to do other things. But that's getting a little deep. So let's jump in and let Amy talk a little bit about the product. As you see, I am excited about this product. I love it.
Awesome. That's what we love to hear. So I thought I'd actually start off by talking a little bit about the problem and kind of the problem that A2X solves. So as Geoff mentioned, A2X is an e-commerce accounting solution. So going a step back, you're kind of an e-commerce seller, you likely set up on Amazon or Shopify. Some of your first priorities might be obviously refining your product, even inventory, your stock levels, things like that. Hopefully from there you'll progress and you'll be focusing on marketing and maybe growing your team and extending to different warehouses and things like that. And unfortunately, what happens with that is that accounting can kind of be an afterthought. I think what also goes alongside with that is you sort of think, oh, I'll get to that when my taxes are due, or I'll worry about that down the line. And the problem with e-commerce is that it's probably quite safe to make an assumption that you'd be able to log into a tool like Amazon and be able to get all the accounting information that you need, but it's just not the case. It's really complicated. An example for Amazon is that sellers are paid every 2 weeks, so very frequently that will cover a month end, and it will include, I think there's like up to 400 or 500 different transaction types that payout might include. So you're a seller, you're getting money in your bank account, it's covering a 2-week period, it's covering 400 or 500 different transaction types. So all of a sudden you've got to try and reconcile this payout that you've got in your bank account and figure out what all those transactions are for, what fees you've paid. Amazon might still be holding on to money. There might be money that was paid from a previous period. There's all sorts of things that might be going into that payout. And so to reconcile it is really, really difficult. So there is the option. You can obviously do it manually, but that's kind of what Jay was saying earlier. Anyone that's had to do it manually knows the struggle. Like it's incredibly difficult. I think as soon as you get a reasonable number of orders, which wouldn't even need to be that many, probably 100 orders, which is relatively small on the Amazon side, you're getting thousands of lines into a spreadsheet. So trying to pivot those and get everything to balance to create an entry gets really, really complicated. So that's what A2X does. It's not all doom and gloom in the world of e-commerce accounting. So A2X will create an invoice in Xero that reconciles the payout. So if you're familiar with the Xero banking screen, you'll see the deposit come in from Amazon, and then you'll see the entry that A2X creates, and it will reconcile perfectly with the money you've received. And it will also split out the transactions into the correct period they occurred. So if it covers a month end, in the example that I mentioned before, then you'll have all of the right transactions into the right period, which is really important for obviously month end bookkeeping, but also end of financial year bookkeeping. So that's what A2X does. And I guess the key thing with A2X is that you have that accuracy and that surety because it's matching perfectly to the money you've received. So down to the penny. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what A2X provides.
Were you going to say something?
I think that's really awesome too, right? Because the sales data and all the transactional data then lives in Amazon and also A2X rather than in the Xero accounting software, right? And we all know that if we get a certain number of transactions coming through to Xero on a monthly basis, you're going to slow down the system and effectively break it, or certain transactions don't come through, you're missing stuff. So it's great that you're able to do that in bring that data over in a single invoice.
Absolutely. We've seen people come over to A2X and they've just completely started a brand new Xero instance because their last one was clogged. Because if you're doing, and it doesn't take that long to be doing hundreds or thousands of orders on Amazon, which is obviously what you want your store to be doing, you want it to be growing. But unfortunately, if you've got every transaction in there, it just becomes quite laggy. And also, like, how are you going to try and link all of those back to one sales entry? So, that's absolutely a benefit that we see for sure.
It's a really good point there. Sorry, Jay. I was just going to say, like, anecdotally, we have a few customers that are using A2X and Xero that are doing tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in annual sales. And without A2X and having kind of like A2X funneling the data through, they would have to consider a solution like NetSuite and have to graduate off of Xero, right? So what's cool about a tool like A2X is it helps scale as you do and helps you continue to use the tools that you love like Xero.
Yeah, and I was going to point out, Amy, you mentioned that it tracks those deposits and matches to the penny. Well, if there are any anomalies in there, you get a little notice that something doesn't match and to check the marketplace. And so we get those tidbits that help us get through it to ensure that we're looking at it and making sure we're getting it right. Because I've seen where those have come through, and something happens. It's always on the Amazon side where it happens, and you reconcile it out. It's like, oh, AX had that perfectly, and you just had to make sure that something just didn't sync over or something like that, and you reprocess it usually, and it ends up being to the penny, like you said, and it just simplifies it, and it takes that 80-20 rule. 80% of it gets done automatically. We don't have to worry about it. It's probably more like 95%. And once you set it up and you do it and you test it and then you turn it live, let it go. Yes, Amazon does throw new accounts out there on occasion that you'll have to go in and map. And you go in on your month-end process, look at A to X, you can tell that something hasn't been mapped or hasn't been sunk over. So it's really easy to fix it.
Absolutely. There have been times in the past where A2X has identified a brand new transaction type that's just appeared within Amazon data. And so in the past, we've kind of provided feedback and correspondence with Amazon just because we're working with so many Amazon sellers. And like you say, Jay, when you've got that level of data and you see those transactions coming through, and because we are matching to the penny, we'll be identifying those transactions and making sure they're accounted for correctly.
So we know we can bring those transactions over. Now, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, how much level of detail can we get to? If we want to be looking at our financials very specifically.
Yeah, so there's a lot of customization within A2X. We work with a whole bunch of sellers, as you've mentioned, on the massive side, and we also work with smaller sellers as well. So within A2X, we have a mapping functionality similar to the mapping functionality within Xero. So essentially, you can choose how much detail you can include. And an example of that would be, it might be that you want all of your sales to go to just one sales account within Xero, or it might be that you have different product types or different country sales or things like that you want to be splitting out. So you have that option within A2X to get really, really granular, or you can just keep it nice and simple. And A2X really helps with that, because if you're coming in and getting set up, we can create the default accounts for you. So like the most, basic level accounts that you would need from whichever platform you're selling on. So we'd say these are the set accounts that you need from Amazon, and then we would create those within Xero and then start mapping those transactions. So yeah, to answer your question, you can keep it nice and simple, and that's usually how we suggest people get set up. Just start with the basics, and then from there you can get as granular as you like. We have some sellers that would have hundreds of different lines of mapping, and some that might have 15.
Yep. So I have a client that is in 6 or 7 marketplaces, and we've split up every country in them to break it out so they can see what their sales are. In some cases, not much, but they're running a ton of fees. It's like, okay, this is the intel that you need to have to give you the impetus to, okay, maybe we don't need to be selling in that market. So, when your fees are twice as much as your sales, let's look at that and reevaluate. And that's why
100%.
having that data is so important.
And we hear stories like that all the time, and I think it really drives home the importance of accurate financials, because that's the whole thing about accounting or automation. And going back to kind of what I was mentioning at the start, it's easy to forget about accounting or put accounting on the back burner. But when you have this level of data and you have accurate financials and you have that confidence, when you're paying too much in fees and it's not worthwhile. Or you might have one SKU that is just really not profitable and it's actually costing you money. So that might be something worth cutting out, or you might be spending too much or not enough on marketing. So without accurate financials, you're flying pretty blind, essentially. I mean, I know a lot of business owners will say, I know my business and I know how it's working, but without having those financials, you can't really be sure.
And I've had those conversations with business owners. They know their financials, and then you deliver a tax return to them, and it's like, whoa, I didn't have that profit. Well, yeah, you did. You got to understand the basics of those transactions and understand not only, they might know what their COGS are, but do they truly know what all the fees are that they're paying? at the storage, the fulfillment, and the transactional level fees. So, I mean, your 20% margin, or 20% or 80% margin, is really closer to 50 when you're done with all of that. And it's like, all right, and they're putting salary in there that they're paying themselves, but it's not really salary, it's a draw or a distribution that they're pulling. So that's an expense that it's not there. So yeah, that's why it's so important to work with an accountant or bookkeeper, to understand exactly that point there as well, and to be able to sit down before December 31st and have those conversations so that you're not surprised come April 15th.
Totally. Another one that often gets people is marketplace facilitated tax. They think that Amazon's paying all of their tax for them, but there might be some states or products that aren't included in that. So yeah, I can't imagine that stress, hey, of thinking, I've got this all sorted, I've paid everything I should have, and then having a far bigger tax bill than what you're anticipating, especially in those early years of getting into business.
And so far we've only talked Amazon. So I'm sorry, Tam, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna, because Amy, you mentioned tax, right, and tax obligations, and being able to track that properly. E-commerce businesses, even if you're still just selling within the states, let alone globally, right? How are you helping these customers manage their tax obligations or multi-currency?
Absolutely. So within A2X, we can break down the sales depending on which state or which country they were into. So a lot of the information is on the Amazon perspective or on the Shopify side. So making sure that you've got your correct tax rate set up in Shopify, and also tracking which tax has been paid by Amazon. But then when the data comes into A2X, you'll be able to see which sales have had tax on them, how much you've paid in tax. And then also you can break down if you've been selling overseas. So if you are a Shopify seller, sometimes people aren't even aware that they've been selling in states that they have tax obligations in, or starting to branch overseas, and what that means from a tax perspective, whether they need to be registered and things like that. So A2X can provide clarity around those lines, in the mapping page, and then through into the financials as well.
That's pretty important, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's e-commerce, right? It provides so much opportunity. It means that you can go from your garage and essentially sell all over the world, especially with Amazon. It makes it really easy. But yeah, there's so much that goes with it. Even where your inventory's been stored in Amazon warehouses, that might implicate your tax obligations as well. So there's a lot to know, and I can really understand why it's intimidating, and to be honest, why some sellers might try and avoid it, but it's going to catch up with you eventually. So you're better off talking about it.
As a practice, when you get good at e-commerce, that complexity is actually a friend from an opportunity standpoint. You could talk to this, but in terms of there's an understanding of value when there's a tremendous amount of complexity. And the cool thing about value is it helps with how you price your services, and it helps with retaining clients. It's not necessarily a commodity service that you're providing at that point. You're actually providing a mission critical function that helps these businesses succeed. Like a really good example in e-commerce, right? Like e-commerce businesses live and die by their inventory, as an example. And you could only grow so much as you can acquire inventory, and understanding your cash position and your cash flow and how you can afford inventory. And for example, if the cash runs out and you have to acquire lending, then you have to do it in short order. You're likely going to get bad terms. Like, the financial component of running an e-commerce business is of critical importance. And because of that, they understand the value that the accounting and bookkeeping service providers have to their business. And I think that's why there's a lot of opportunity here. And after we talk to bookkeeping practices that service one or two e-commerce clients, and the question that they always have, which is why we focused on marketing at the beginning of the session, is how do I get more of them, right? Because of all the reasons that we've talked about. And Jay, this incredibly well. That's kind of the world that you came into before you became the president of High Rock, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But, talking about your inventory and cash flow, we're heading into Amazon Day or Prime Days here soon, but right now is the time you need to be placing those orders for Black Friday. So if you haven't lined up your cash to put down those deposits on those long-term purchases, you're in a world of hurt. And we actually had a scary story about this a Halloween ago, I believe it was. And one of my clients went through that during COVID. They had to shift because their manufacturers were shut down, and they needed to put numbers together to get funding. And if you don't have your books accurate and up to date, you're not going to be able to do that. And it's so important. And it touches so many different aspects of your business. And it's like, who would think that you'd have to have cash in June to make sure you have sales in November? Well, that's how this works. You have to be able to drop down 50% before you even get those orders made. So it's really important. But shifting,
after you provided those financials, like they must have loved you after that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we were able to turn that around and get that funded, and got those orders in, and it was a other story with that client, but it's all good.
I think
they should have been on
highlights. Oh, sorry, Jay. I was just going to say.
I was going to say.
Really
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, listening to you talk about, understanding how it all works, I think that just really highlights why e-commerce sellers should be working with an e-commerce accountant. Like, could you imagine going to a more traditional practice that didn't have experience with Amazon or Shopify or even e-commerce in general, selling online, trying to explain to them that Black Friday was coming up and you needed to put your order in and things like that? I think it's just so invaluable to speak with an accountant that knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And what I was going to say is this client probably should have been on A to X at that time instead of an ERP system, because they weren't doing what they needed to do on their end to ensure the product was there in the system to produce invoices or to produce COGS. They couldn't ship it out. I mean, it was all 3PL, so they could have done that, but they wanted an inventory system, but they wouldn't allocate the resources to get done what they needed. Whereas if they were just using A to X, it would have simplified my life, because I had to do all those entries and get that all caught up every month, and they ended up paying for it in the long run. But that's why sometimes jumping to a more advanced system isn't always the answer. You start out with the simplest solution, get it to work for you, and then look at jumping to the next level. So that's important. Now, Amy, you did mention Shopify a moment ago, and that does, if you're selling on Amazon and Shopify, completely changes the sales tax conversation, because if it was all marketplace facilitator, now it's not, because now you have combined sales in those states, and it's really confusing. So A to X isn't just Amazon, like we've been talking. It's Shopify, it's Etsy, it's eBay. Etsy, right? I got that one.
Yeah. You're doing great.
And Walmart. So if you're selling in multiple, and a lot of those marketplaces are collecting, but every one of those transactions count towards your Nexus levels. And it was a lot simpler back before the Wayfair decision in 2017-18, but it still was complicated because of the other Nexus rules due to where your inventory was and things like that. But today, every quarter, those rules are changing. And it used to be $100,000 of sales, but now it's $100,000 and 200 sales. So every month it changes at different states. So you got to really pay attention to it. It's not something you could just set and forget.
Absolutely. We find that with all of the different sales channels that we work with, often in every case, there's different transaction types and different nuances. And Amazon, you might get paid less frequently, every 2 weeks, but it's all from one source. Whereas Shopify, you might get paid more frequently, but you might have a bunch of different payment gateways on your store. So you might have Shopify Pay, PayPal, Stripe, Afterpay, a whole bunch of different sources coming in, and then they have their fees as well. So it starts to get really, really complicated. We actually, another kind of story to really concrete way to be working with an e-commerce accountant, we were doing a webinar recently, and one of our partners was talking about, they had brought on this e-commerce client and they had Amazon Pay on their Shopify store, and they were also selling on Amazon. And so they had been paid by Amazon, but they hadn't realized that they hadn't actually collected the money from Amazon Pay. And so I think they had thousands of dollars waiting for them to collect. So had they not known about that, they probably would have never actually received that money. So yes, there are all sorts of nuances that go with the different channels. And so understanding how they work, making sure you've got really good data on each of the different platforms is really key, because they've got different ways of charging fees and doing freight and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, and the client I was referred to earlier was also using merchant funding accounts for loan. They were getting loans and fronting the payments through their payments. So the payments were coming in, and we had to account for all of the loan payments as well. And at one point, they had at least 6 of those going at once. So it was interesting, and you definitely was a great learning experience for my team, because I took them through every step of it. But yeah, all those merchant accounts can be difficult.
I think that really reinforces the purpose of automation as well, because I mean, for most apps, you could probably do it yourself. Like, I know you can for Amazon, even though it's really complicated. But for all of these reasons we've just explained, I think a common reason not to automate is because they don't want to spend the money on the subscription or the service, for example. But there's always complications and there's always time. And I think, especially when you're a business owner, it's so easy to not kind of keep track of your own time and the time that you're spending on doing something manually as opposed to automating it. And that's even more important when you have an accountant. If they're setting up automation, then they're going to be in a far better position. Otherwise, they're going to be needing to charge their clients for the hours that they're doing it manually, or try and recoup that cost somewhere. So there's so many benefits to it.
Yeah, and the business owner needs to look at what is the opportunity cost of having to do all of that work. What other things could they be doing, like promoting their products, doing sales activities, etc., that they're having to do because they're spending that time on accounting that they don't need to be doing.
Exactly. As Geoff said, they need to be doing webinars, not doing their accounts manually.
Exactly. So
I'm kind of curious, y'all. What do you have on the? Sorry, Geoff. Did you have something regarding that?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to ask about what's on the horizon for you guys. Like, are you looking at more integrations? What's on your product roadmap?
Do you want to talk about PayPal, or do you want me to do it?
You go. I was like, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that, so I'm glad that you mentioned it.
I mean, you heard it here first. You want to talk about it, or do you want me to talk about it?
Sure, go for it. I can jump in after you.
Yeah. So again, like, our objective is to automate as much of the e-commerce accounting process as humanly possible. And a big part of the accounting process includes payment gateways. And the number one payment gateway in the world is PayPal, which tends to be a challenge for a lot of the e-commerce businesses that we work with and the accounting and bookkeepers that support them. So we're imminently going to be launching a PayPal integration, a beta at first, to get a lot of customer feedback and partner feedback, and then eventually we'll do kind of a general availability a general availability launch in the coming months. So PayPal is one of the big ones that is upcoming. And again, like, we have a lot more smaller features and functionality that are going to be coming out, all in service to automating more of the e-commerce accounting process. Amy, did you want to jump in and add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the awesome thing with PayPal as well is that it starts to get really complicated, because you can get paid through PayPal. So you might have PayPal on your Shopify store and you'll have money coming in from sales. But what a lot of sellers will also do is use PayPal to pay for overseas transactions. So they might use PayPal to purchase their inventory, for example, or pay staff even. So the integration that A2X is building is going to really help with that, not just reconciling from an e-commerce accounting perspective, but really looking to understand those transactions on the PayPal store, which is really, it's going to be such a time saver for sellers and accountants rather than having to go through and identify what all of the different transaction types are. So yeah, PayPal is a big one. The team's also, quite recently, we've been working a lot in providing reports that allow sellers to compare their data back with their sales channel. So we've recently launched a Shopify report and an Amazon report that allow you to make sure that your data within Xero, within A2X, and within your sales channel, so Shopify, for example, is all completely aligned. And it might sound like an obvious one, but as we've said, e-commerce accounting is super challenging. Things change, returns happen, and sometimes orders get edited within the Shopify channel, which will mean that your numbers aren't lining up with what you're seeing in your accounting software. So we've done a lot of work around providing reports that help you reconcile your accounts and provide like that extra sort of stamp of confidence that everything is tying back. So I guess PayPal in the accuracy space. And then another area, sorry, 1 second.
And I'll say while Amy is getting sorted, Camp. So we have Camp A2X, which as you can see kind of behind me, our annual partner event is coming up this early September. Nice bucket hat. That is a good.
My daughter's not in the house. I could put it on.
Great.
She's like, Dad, I'm not going to stand next to you if you're wearing that.
I mean, her loss.
It is.
Probably just because you look so good in it. She doesn't want to. So we have Camp, which is our annual partner event. It's grown significantly since the inaugural camp last year. I think last year we had about 40 of the world's top e-commerce accountants and bookkeepers. And this year it's grown by, I think, 60%. So bringing more people into the fold, which is awesome. And we also have quite a few sponsors that will be joining us. So Xero is the sponsor, Sin7 Inventory, Finale Inventory, Relay Financial, and Fathom are all going to be there. And we're really excited about it because it's an opportunity for us to connect with folks like Jay and the other e-commerce accountants and bookkeepers that are supporting e-commerce businesses around the world. It helps inform our product strategy, but it's also an opportunity for everyone to connect and to understand a lot of the challenges that their respective practices and clients are facing, and to work together and troubleshoot on how we can resolve them. And then a cool thing about Camp is we try to bring in all of the learnings together and then distribute that externally and digitally to everyone that couldn't be in attendance. So watch out for that. Amy, if you're sorted, you can talk about the last one.
There's not usually a great time for a scratchy throat, but that was great. Otherwise, we would have never seen the bucket hat on Jay.
Yeah, for sure.
So the other point I was just going to say is that A2X is also looking really closely at COGS and cost of goods sold, because it's a really big pain point for e-commerce accountants, and there seems to be never-ending sources of lists of cost prices and different places where people are trying to keep track of inventory and things like that. So the team's at the moment looking into how we can make that easier, how that can be more automated. So yeah, watch this space.
Awesome.
And Tam, what's coming up with the community? We love communities.
The community, yeah. First of all, I just want to mention thank you for sharing those new updates with us. I know you're like, oh, do we share this with you?
I was glad that Geoff led.
Yeah, so it's just, great. You heard it from here first. Super excited. I know that, reconciliations and COGS don't sound all that sexy, but as an ex-accountant, and I know Jay, accountants love to reconcile and just make sure that everything is accurate and on point. So those are really great. And then the PayPal integration, Jay, what are your thoughts on that? Are you super excited about that?
Sign me up for that beta, because I love PayPal as a consumer. I hate it as an accountant. And, if you look at the feeds or the transaction list, for every single transaction, there's at least 3 different entries that go into it. It makes it so difficult to reconcile it, especially if they're putting holds on it and then releasing the holds. It's really difficult to reconcile it. So I'm looking forward to this, and can't wait to test it out.
Beauty.
Yeah.
Love when we hit the mark.
Yeah.
Now we just got to execute.
Well, you threw a ton at the wall at the last Camp A2X when it came to product, and it started rolling out, and you have hit very well. Now we will see how much of that wall Brittany will use at this next camp, as you recall. She needs walls to get done what she's going to want to do. So I'm looking forward to that. So highly anticipating getting back up there to camp and getting back into some brainstorming sessions and sharing with the global leaders in the e-commerce space.
Love it. And I'll give the product team the feedback because they work incredibly hard and they really, really, really want to deliver for customers. So this is awesome.
For sure. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. And I am sure we will see you again very soon because, we want to talk about those PayPal updates. And yeah, for sure. So thank you both. Looking forward to seeing you here about 2 months now. It's camp about that, right?
Awesome. And if you're ever doing anything that has a camera involved, and I'm sure Amy's going to do a video for PayPal, Amy's there.
Awesome.
I'm your girl.
We're giving your Facebook advertising, TikTok, all the things.
Yeah, we'll borrow some of those videos and train our AI to make our avatar, our Amy avatar.
Great idea.
I'll be out of a job.
No, you'll just be sitting on the beach collecting residuals.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah. In your bucket hat, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, again, thank you. And, as this is going to live on, please post your comments. We'll be checking the comments here and we'll get back to you on that. And, we'll be back in 2 weeks. So go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified when we post our schedules and our lives going forward. So thank you all, and thank you everybody out there. Have a great rest of your week. Take care, everybody.